Hey guys, my name is Marta, welcome to my channel, and today I'm going to be doing a bit of a different video because I decided to join a challenge that I've seen many people do here on BookTube, which is the challenge to read a book for every single country in the world. I am aware that I have already read some books that I consider are important for some countries, so I am going to count them towards the challenge. In order to organize what I read for this challenge, I'm going to create a Notion spreadsheet, so that is what I'm going to be doing for the first part of the video. And then I guess I will talk a bit about the books that I have already read for some countries and that I am counting towards the challenge. Before I show you how I'm making the spreadsheet, which is not going to take much time because I don't really know how to do fancy stuff on Notion, I want to say that I am not only going to be reading a book, but a book and a play, because if you haven't noticed by me saying it a few times, I really like reading plays. I am very passionate about drama in general, so I want to read a book and a play for every single country in the world. And yeah, without further ado, let's create this spreadsheet. So this is going to be my spreadsheet. Here I'm going to know the country, here the book, and here the play that I read for each country. It's going to be very basic, very simple, but very easy to see, which is its main purpose. So yeah, let's start noting all of the almost 200 countries that exist, which I am going to get out of Wikipedia, as you can see. So I am done with this spreadsheet, and I guess now I'm going to go to my Goodreads read list and check which books I want to count towards this challenge. Hi again, so it is the next day, and in the second part of the video I am going to go through the books that I have read and that I am counting toward the challenge. I am going to go in alphabetical order when it comes to the countries. I am aware that some of the books I have already talked about, some of them I think I have even a book review of, so I will link that down below, and for the rest of them I will try to explain what they are about and my thoughts on them in a brief but at the same time explanatory way. The first book is actually a play, and it is a play that I have chosen for Belgium, and it is L'Oiseau Bleu by Maurice Maeterlinck. This is a Belgian play from the late 19th and early 20th century. Maeterlinck is one of Belgium's most well-known classic playwrights, and having read this for uni and studied it has made me choose it as the play that will represent that country. It is a children's story full of symbolism in which we follow these two twins who one night get transported into this fantasy land in which they have to find a favorite blue bird, as the title translates to in English. It's a fantastic play filled with beautiful imagery that I can imagine would be amazing to see performed. It's very beautiful, it's very simple but at the same time profound, and it's overall a story that I think everyone can enjoy, no matter if you are a teenager, a child or an adult, because besides being a children's story in a way, it has its own deep meanings, and behind all this sweetness there is a message that I think is universal. Next book for the next country is also another place. Well, it's actually 3 plays, and it is Sean O'Casey's the Dublin plays. This is the play or plays that I have chosen to represent Ireland, and I've also studied them at uni, hence what I know, why they are very important for the country, and why I think it's good to have them as the play that I chosen in order to read something from the country. O'Casey's Dublin plays were a trilogy set during the Irish-UK conflict, and they are set at different times. The first one being during the War of Independence, the second one being after the War of Independence, and the third one also later. As Loss of Blood, these 3 plays are filled with symbolism, especially relating to color and to objects that show up on stage. The 3 plays are also tragicomedies, so besides being set in these very difficult times and in these times of insecurity when it comes to what was going to happen in the future, the plays feature very funny and ridiculous characters that bring some humor into the story and that in a way light up its very tragic tone. The 3 plays have also a similar structure, and they all finish in some kind of disaster that is slightly foreshadowed, I would say, from the initial atmosphere. They are also plays that discuss themes like normal people and social class, since its characters are not great people but normal citizens who are caught up in this very unstable environment. When it comes to social class, the book also depicts how that social class influences the household's relationships. So we can see how women were the ones who did everything while men did nothing. The 3 plays also don't shy away from showing all the violence that was happening during that time period, and they were the cause of some conflict when they were first performed. Sean O'Casey really showcases the struggles that Irish people went through, and also shows how conflictive the relationship between Ireland and the UK was at this time period. These are great plays to read if you are interested in Irish history, and if you want to learn about it in a light-hearted but at the same time raw and realistic way that is also filled with very interesting symbols that bring way more meaning and depth into the story. We're going to Colombia, and the novel that I've chosen for it is one that I have read 2 times, and it is 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel García Márquez, translated from the Spanish Cien Años de Soledad. This is a novel that I have read twice, and it's a book that has everything. It's a book that encompasses 100 years of a family's history and touches upon many themes, the main of which being faith, I would say, and tragedy. The book basically tells the tragic story of the Buendia family, who is caught up in this cycle of repeating their history over and over again. This is a book that might be a bit hard to read because of some of the events that take place, such as the multiple incestuous relationships that happen within the family. But personally, I think that should not be an excuse to not read it. It is a book that, through showcasing things like incest, to show us the darkest part of a country's history. It's a book that also discusses the influence of this outside world on a small community, how things that are brought up by foreigners really contaminate a country, or in this case this small village named Macondo where the story takes place. It's overall a fascinating story that you have to experience for yourself to fully understand it and to give it your own interpretation, but overall I would say it's a story of love, of discovery, and of trying to fight against all the dark and obscure things that are put up in your way in the case of the characters because of their faith. It's a book filled with courageous characters and not so courageous and more evil characters. It's a fascinating book to read. It's a book that I think everyone should read at least once in their life, and it's a book that you can never get tired of rereading, because upon each reread you will get to learn and discover new things inside it. Next, we have the book that I am counting towards Iraq, and it's a book that I am not going to discuss much since I have a review of upon my channel, and it is Frankenstein in Baghdad by Ahmed Sadawi. This is a retelling of Frankenstein set during the war of Iraq. It's a magical realism novel that mixes supernatural events with a crime thriller-esque story. It's a book that discusses many things, between of which I would highlight the tragedy of a war and the unstable political climate that was present during the Iraq War. It's a book with a pretty wide cast of characters, between of which we can find people that have a more realistic way of seeing the events that are taking place and ones that are believers of the supernatural. It's a fascinating novel to read, it's a fascinating novel to reflect upon, and it is one of those books that, even though I was going into that with pretty high expectations, did not fail to surprise and amaze me. Next, I have another play that I am counting towards the UK, and it is Yes, But There Was Jerusalem. This is a pretty recent play, but it's a play that has been talked about as a new classic. It tells the story of our main character, Johnny, also known as Rooster, who lives in this caravan in the middle of the forest selling drugs to young people. It's a story that takes place within a very short period of time, and that really shows the instability of this character's lifestyle. It's a story that is filled with symbolism, with allusions to different British myths, and a story that in 3 acts discusses many things like social class, like young versus old generations, the hope for a better future, or the not possibility of having such a thing like that. It's a play that I can see myself rereading after reading critical articles and things about it, since I have the feeling that I missed a lot when I read it. It's one that I read recently, but that I can see myself rereading within a few weeks, because it is not only short but also really funny and readable. It's a play that, because of its mixture of songs and imaginary, I think would be amazing to see performed. And yeah, it's a play that also has allusions to Christianity, and it's very easy to establish a relationship between our main character and Jesus, and it's overall a very interesting play that mixes humor with social criticism in a very unique and special way. So yeah, would highly recommend it. Next, I have another very recent read, and it is George Saunders' Lincoln in the Bardo, a book that I am counting as my read for the United States. This is George Saunders' only novel, I think, and it tells the story of Lincoln's son after he died, or while he is dying, and it's still in what he calls the Bardo, which is this weird sort of limbo. It's a book that I I decided to choose as a representation of the United States because of the historical research that you can physically see Saunders did before writing the novel. It's a book that mixes historical reports with the author's own imagination. It's a very well-researched book that does not only tell a story that is unique, funny, and at the same time deep, but that also talks about real events that the contradictory views that many people have upon this event, which was Lincoln's son dying. It's a book that I can also see myself reading really soon, because I think it's a book that you need to read twice to get the full experience. And in fact, I've heard that the audiobook is really good, so I hope I can get my hands into it and you listen to it as my second way of experiencing the story. It's a book that is also reminiscent in its own way of Dante's Inferno, and it's a book in which its characters are very uniquely created, since you can really see how each of them has their own backstory, which you will get to learn, but not in a boring way, since it will be intertwined with these funny lines, and you basically will end up laughing all out loud while reading this, because the characters are exquisitely created, they are really funny. This book is amazing, I don't know what else to say about it, just read it. I was hesitant before reading it because I do not know much about American history, but I can guarantee you that no matter what your knowledge of it is, you will like it, because the book is very accessible and it's fascinating. You have to read it. There is a reason why it won the Booker Prize. Yeah, I loved it. One of my favorites of the year. Really recommend it. And for the last two books, we have the book that I have chosen for South Africa, which is also a book that I read a few months ago, and it is The Life and Times of Michael Kay by J.M. Coetzee. This is a novel set during the South African Civil War, and it tells the story of Michael Kay trying to escape from his rural home with very sick and almost dying mother. It's a very sad and realistic portrayal of the unstable political environment, and at the same time of the grief and sadness felt by this character after his mother dies. And that is not a spoiler because it literally happens during the first pages of the story. It's a book that I would compare to Albert Camus' The Stranger because of the main character's attitude and apathy at the end of the story. It's a book that really shows how grief can turn you into, and the influence that living like our main character has to live in order to reach this farm made him. It's a very sad, cruel story that doesn't have any filters. It's very violent, it's very realistic with its violence, and it really shows how pitiless people can be. It's also a very cruel but realistic portrayal of self-destruction, because there is a moment where you can see how Michael Kay is slowly trying to kill himself by not eating. It's a book that encompasses a lot in such a few pages, and that besides being so short, you can't rush while reading. There is a moment in the story when you physically can't read a lot of pages because of what is going on, because of how the theme is being treated. It's a book that I cannot talk much about because I just don't know what to say. It amazed me. It made me want to reread it, and I don't know if I am capable of doing that because I know what to expect, I know what's going on, and even though I know that I will reread it in the future, it's in short a book that I think you have to be ready for before reading it, because it's not an easy read, but it's a book worth doing the effort of reading. And last, I have a book that I read last year and that I am counting for Zambia, and it is The Outbreak by Namwali Serpel. This is a multi-generational story of 3 families during 3 generations, and that starts in the middle of the 20th century and goes into the future. It's the story of these 3 families, some of which are Zambian and some of them are foreigners that end up in Zambia. It's a portrayal of a changing society. It's a book in which you can see a critique of colonialism, of technology, and lots of different things that happen during a country's development in time. It's a book that you can see a lot of research has gone into. It's a book that it's perfect for all kind of readers, since it encompasses realism with magical realism with even sci-fi at the end. It's a book that is also very interestingly narrated by a chorus of mosquitoes, and it's a book that has a lot to say and that I can talk a lot about without going into spoilers. However, one of my favorite booktubers, Tanya from Bookish Topics, did an amazing review explaining it, so I will link it down below in case you are interested. It's a book that I personally really enjoyed and that I think was one of my favorites of last year. It's also a book that I constantly think about besides having read it over a year ago. And it's a book that I highly recommend if you want to discover Zambian literature and learn a bit about its own history, because the book shows a lot of different important moments that took place during the history of the country last century, and that is something that is worth reading about, since most of the events are unknown of outside the country. So that was all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a like if you enjoyed it, and feel free to comment down below if you read any of these books and what are your thoughts on them. Also comment down below if you are doing any kind of around the world reading challenge. I was personally very inspired by Emma from the channel Emmy, who is also doing it. And also feel free to comment down below some books or plays that you think are representative of your own country and that I should read for this reading challenge. Last but not least, subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me, and I hope you guys gone amazing, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!